Hello, my name is Wendy Ojiro. I'm a real estate agent based in Nairobi, and today I'd like to talk to you about tenant screening process, which is a very important part of renting out your property to potential tenants. What are some of the questions you should ask? What are the crucial things you should be looking out for when you're screening your tenant, just to minimize the amount of risk you'll be taking on while having this tenant in your property? I usually recommend you do this process in a written format. If you don't have a form that you're using already, please email me. My email address is in the description box, and I'll share with you the form that I usually use for my tenants. It is just a form basically asking them a little bit about their details, like their nationality, their marital status, why they're moving from their current property, how much rent they were paying in their past property, a KYC document for your records, and to have it in writing. So I'll share with you a few things to be on the lookout for, a few questions to ask during the tenant screening process. And this is a very important part because you'll find out a lot of things simply by asking or researching. And so I'll just point out a few questions that you have to ask before bringing in any tenant into your property. The first question is, why are you moving from your current place? This is the most important question, especially for residential properties. So you want to hear answers like, we've just gotten married, or we are getting more kids and so we want a bigger space, so we want to move closer to the school, we want to move closer to the workplace, so we've just come back into the country, or we are new to the country. To be legitimate reasons why they are moving, and you need to listen to them. And if you're face to face with them, also be on the lookout for their body language, just to make sure that everything is in sync. The second question you want to ask is, how long did you live in the past place you're moving to? Anything less than a year is a huge red flag, unless they had an emergency like the ceiling collapsed, or they're having water issues or security issues. Any tenant who has lived in their current residence for less than a year is a problem and will most likely give you the same problem. The third question you want to ask during this process is, what is your source of income? This is a very, very important question because it will indicate if your client can afford the property. If your client works for a stable company, that's a big tick. The more stable the company, the better. If your client has been working for some period of time, the better. Business people are a little bit more risky, and I say this with all due respect, myself being a business person, but I know that business people as tenants are a little bit more risky because sometimes their income fluctuates and sometimes they get behind on their rent payment, some of them. So you want to be on the lookout of what type of job are they doing. If it's a double income household, are they both working? How long have they been working? And you want to verify this information because people can give you half-truths where they're not really telling you the truth, but they're also not lying. For example, a tenant can come to you and be like, I work at BAT. And if you don't prod further, you'd be like, wow, BAT is a good employer, I'll take you on as a tenant. But in reality, maybe they worked at BAT 6 years ago, and right now they're sort of in between jobs, and so they've not given you the right information. So look out for those small things like, is that the place they're working currently? What is their position? What is their occupation? What is the nature of their business? How risky is their business? Make sure that you know the source of income of your tenant. Also, when the client tells you where they work or what sort of business they do, it can give you a rough estimate of what they could be earning just from your rough calculations. Then you'll be able to make a conscious decision on whether you want to deal with this person. The fourth question you should ask is, who will be paying for this house? It looks like a basic question. Don't assume, if it's a double income household, don't assume it's the man who will be paying. Just don't make any assumptions. Make sure that you find out who will be paying this house. Also find out how many occupants will be in this house? How many kids do you have? How many people do you plan on having in this house? Just to avoid problems, because sometimes you have someone who comes into the house alone, but it turns out they want to sort of house share, and those are risky housing situations to get into. So people who are looking to house share, people who are looking to live multiple families in one unit, you should make it very clear on what your terms are on that, and ask, don't assume who is paying and how many people will be living in this house. Generally, you want to keep it at about 2 people per bedroom. So if your house is a 2-bedroom, try to make sure 4 people. If it's a 3-bedroom, 6 people. If it's a 1-bedroom, 2 people. This reduces the wear and tear on your property, and is also good to make sure that you're not inconveniencing the neighbors in terms of parking, in terms of noise, in terms of use of common area facilities. Because you find sometimes, let's say for example, you have a swimming pool in your compound, and let's say you're 20 units. But if one unit ends up having 10 people living in that family, them alone coming into the swimming pool already fills up the whole pool, and it just inconveniences all other people who would want to use that facility. So that's something you want to be very conscious of. The next question you want to ask is, when do you plan to move, and how long would you hope to stay here? This is very important for clarification purposes, because sometimes you have someone who's coming and doesn't want to stay for long. For example, there's some people who are from the US who sometimes are not very conversant with how the lease terms are here. So sometimes you find someone asking you for a 6-month lease, but that is not possible. So you have to make sure you find out how long are they looking to stay. The longer term the tenant, the better for you. The other thing you want to find out or really prod further into is the character of the person who you'll be living with. So when you're doing a background check, you're doing some research, it's very important to look at both, to cover both bases, both the financial side and the character side, to make sure that the tenant you're bringing into your property checks all the boxes. Because sometimes we look only at the financial part and we forget the character part. Make sure both are good, because sometimes you have someone whose finances are on point, they can pay you for a whole year, but they are engaging in dubious business activities that can get you into trouble with the law. But on the other side, you also have people whose character is very good, it checks all the boxes, but their finances are not in check. And this is especially a challenge with commercial properties. When you're a commercial landlord, you have to do even more due diligence and take more time than a residential tenant would. Because you see, entrepreneurs by their nature, they're risk takers, they're brave, they're optimistic. So sometimes they come, take up your property is maybe renting for 300,000 a month, and they take it using that optimistic outlook that my business will grow, I'll get these customers, I'll do this. Then a few months down the line, when things are not like that, what they hoped for, what they expected for, then they start falling behind their rent and giving you issues with rent collection, and soon you'll have a vacancy because of that. Yet this is someone whose character was in check, their track record was in check, but they really cannot afford your property. So take your time to make sure you cover both those bases. Make sure the client also puts all this in writing. Make sure you know their nationality, have a reference, have a form of identification, whether it's their ID or their passport, and a colored passport picture attached before you let anyone rent out your property. Also, let your expectations be very clear. Let them know about your security deposit and rent. Find out if they have any pets. Find out all the things that would be a deal breaker for you. For example, if they have any pets and you don't allow pets into your compound, let them know. Be very honest and upfront with your client during the tenant screening process. While you're also screening your tenants, please make sure that you rely on facts. Don't take any client at face value. That is my tip for you as a landlord, as an agent, as a property manager. Because it's like when you're dating, The first 2-3 times, someone will show you the best part of them. It's the same with tenants. When they're coming to take on your property, they will show you the best part of them. They will represent themselves in the best light possible. So it's up to you to read between the lines, do a little bit more research, and know who is this person, what are the facts. Don't make any assumptions based on the car they drive, or where they went to school, or which school their kids are going to, or their race. Don't make any assumptions based on that. Problematic tenants come from all over. I don't like stereotypes, but it's also good to be aware of the stereotypes that are in the market. For example, we have had issues with a good number of politicians and lawyers. So generally, you need to be more cautious when renting out your property to a politician, to a lawyer, to the Yahoo boys from West Africa, who they really can't tell you where the source of income is, and they'll sort of pay you in piecemeal. They can't pay you your rent in full. So if the rent is 100, they'll pay you 20 today, another 20 after a week, and they have loud parties. So be aware, profile your tenant. Don't take it as a stereotype to judge them in a way that is not fair, but profile your tenant. What is their age? What is their income? What are their habits? So that you just know that what you're getting into, and to know the right type of client you want. If your property is in a family-oriented area, you don't want to bring in a single 20-year-old boy throwing loud parties every week. You have to be very, very sensitive to the needs of your neighbors, the needs of your surrounding, and make sure that you have the right profile tenant, the right profile of the tenant for your property. Also, when it comes to payment, please do not budge on the deposit. The deposit is very important because it shows more importantly than being security for when they damage the property. It's just an indication of whether your tenant can afford the rent. And this is why in commercial properties, they usually ask you for 3 months deposit and 3 months rent, because it shows that this person who can pay you 6 months in advance is capable of paying you the rent. And that is that. Don't fall for any stories. The tenant can either afford your property and fall in line with your terms, or not. So that's what I have to share for today. Please be careful. Please take your time in this process. And after you've done all this, remember to check with your gut, because your gut is the ultimate judge. Don't take in any clients that you have any doubts with whatsoever. If you choose the right tenant during the tenant screening process, your management will be easier. If you skip that process, you'll pay later. So in case of any other questions, please feel free to contact me and I will be happy to answer.